Paul Polman, welcome to #World Food Day.
Thank you, Jeremy, for having me.
So, Paul, the first question I wanted to ask you is, why is it important to raise awareness and talk about the global challenges in relation to food on World Food Day?
Well, I'm really glad that you call out World Food Day, and we should call it out every day, because the food system that we have is actually going to the heart of what we call the Sustainable Development Goals. In September 2015, we all signed 193 countries in the world the Sustainable Development Goals with an objective to irreversibly eradicate poverty and do that in a more sustainable and equitable way. And unfortunately, the way that we currently produce and consume food is probably one of the most destructive forces for us on the planet. If we like it or not, we have to feed the 8 billion people going to 10 billion people. But the way we do that currently is probably causing the biggest damage, not only to our biodiversity, but also to human health itself. And I'll give you a very simple example. To feed these 8 billion people, we're cutting down the world's forest, we're depleting the world's lands, we're keeping the smallholder farmers in poverty. We're wasting 30 to 40% of the food that we produce. It takes 70% of our water. Very inefficient way of doing this. And I could go on and on and on. If you just take the effect on climate change alone, just the deforestation, the degrading of the land, the methane that comes out of the cows with the proteins that we eat coming from animals, all that together is 30% of our global warming. We cannot solve climate change, for example, if we don't solve our food system. And then on the other hand, if we turn our food system into a nature, people, climate positive food system, which is by all means possible, we actually could be 30% of the solution to tackle climate change. Now, this inefficiency of the system that we have comes at an enormous cost. Many people estimate that that's about $12 trillion of negative externalities that we have to compensate somewhere else. Increasingly, for example, we see as our food systems how our food value chain is being disrupted by climate change. Take the terrible hurricanes happening now in the US, Hurricane Mistral or Hurricane Helena. Take the terrible floodings that we see in many parts of the world as we speak. Take the droughts. There is no company in the world producing food that doesn't incur an incredible cost because of the disruptions caused by climate change. And at the same time as we talk, the food system itself is a key driver of climate change. Now, what is so beautiful about the food system, as we've seen during the time of COVID, when everything stopped for a while and we had a moment of reflection, how quickly nature comes back, how quickly it restores, how it can bring us back to an equilibrium that we all need. In fact, $1 invested in food gives a $16 return, and the returns are coming fast. And that's what makes it so attractive. So the task ahead is a tough one, because we haven't been able to do it. But we need to move to what is called regenerative agriculture, where we reward farmers for restoring the soil health, where we call biodiversity strengthening, improving a way of farming, where we give the farmers a more decent income and an incentive to change, where we give people healthy food, and where we don't waste 30 to 40% of the food. These are the main things that we need to attack. And one of the key drivers of that, frankly, will be how we behave as individual citizens. We can decide not to eat meat, and that's probably the biggest and most important impact that we can have on the planet. Doesn't mean every day no meat. It means just cut it down to perhaps once or twice a week if you want to start on that journey. It also means that we have to be careful from where we buy the food and what food we eat. Is it in season? Is it not in season? How we take care of our oceans. The fish, we're depleting the oceans of fishery. So be mindful that we leave some for future generations. And frankly, we would all be served to move to regenerative agriculture, because at the end of the day, it's not only more resilient, the farmers not only getting hopefully better livelihoods out of it, but it's also healthier. One of the main problems we have in this world with our food system is that we leave about 860 million people hungry, don't know if they wake up the next day, no access to decent food, acute food shortage is now affecting 200 to 250 million people. And on the other side of the equation, we have nearly half the world's population being overweight or obese, causing one of the biggest pandemics, which is diabetes 2, with an enormous cost to society, cost on healthcare, cost on sickness, cost on absenteeism at work, etc., etc. So we'd be very well advised to just take a small amount of our money, 400 or 500 billion a year, which frankly is nothing anymore, to turn our food system into a nature, people, climate, positive food system that helps us live now and for generations to come.
Paul, I mean, it's incredible to hear you speak of all of these things, and it's wonderful to learn on World Food Day about regenerative agriculture and some of the choices that we can make as individuals. Really exciting, and thank you for sharing. Can I ask you, look, you were the CEO of Unilever, you were the CEO of many other companies. I mean, you were one of the 24 people, I think, that wrote the Sustainable Development Goals and were a part of that when it was all manifested. And I mean, you've written the amazing book Net Zero and other publications. Can I ask you, Paul, as you enter this phase of your life, you've got a lot of energy, you're still young. What is the most pressing issue, Paul? When you wake up in the morning, what do you want to resolve over the next 5 years?
Well, the most pressing issue, and why we wrote the book Net Positive, how courageous companies thrive by giving more than they take, is that we need to be sure that our global economy, this system that we depend on, is sustainable now and for generations to come, that we attack probably the three biggest challenges, which is climate change, most pertinent right now, which is the destruction of biodiversity. We are part of nature, and by destroying biodiversity, we're in the process of destroying ourselves. And then last but not least, inequality. If you have a system where too many people feel they're not participating or being left behind, it will ultimately rebel against itself. We see that now happening in many places. We see it playing out in politics and global relationships that we have with each other. We've become more polarized. We've become more nationalist, more xenophobic in some cases, more democracies on the decline, and people are very dissatisfied with the way this world is being run, not only by the politicians, but also by many companies. So the essence of the book Net Positive is that we need to move to a system where we profit from solving the world's problems, not creating the world's problems. And currently, many governments are still having laws and regulations on the books that drive us in the wrong direction. We call it perverse subsidies. You look in the food value chain alone, and we have about $2.6 trillion of perverse subsidies that move us into the wrong direction, destroy biodiversity, encourage food waste. We don't want that. Far more, actually, in perverse subsidies than we need to put a good food system in place. And at the same time, on the corporate world as well, most, if not all of the companies still operate in what I call the CSR space, corporate social responsibility, that deals with being less bad, less carbon in the atmosphere, less plastics in the oceans, less deforestation in the value chain. But when you've overshot the planetary boundaries that we have, to the extent that we have already, when we're close to negative tipping points where the world's Earth systems get out of balance, less bad is still bad. We need to move our thinking to quite a different thinking, which is restorative, reparative, regenerative. And nothing better to do that than in our food systems. Our first priority, which we could achieve in the next 5 to 10 years, is to have at least 50% of our food systems come from regenerative agriculture. I have a farm myself in the south of England, and we're moving quite rapidly to regenerative agriculture. The second thing we need to do is to restore nature. We've made a global pledge, all countries in the world, the 30 by 2030 pledge, which means to protect land, forest, and oceans, about 30% of it, to restore and repair our biodiversity. We need to be sure that as we change our food systems, that we build resilient rural economies. The average age of a farmer in Africa is 57 years. He can't take much risk, or she can't take much risk with the few years left. So we need to help them. The average income of a farmer in the UK is less than £40,000. You can't really live off that decently and make your business run successfully. So we make it financially attractive for farmers, start to pay them for nature-based services, start to pay them to increase their soil health. We'd all benefit from that and get healthier food in the process. And then we need to ourselves contribute. We need to diversify the way we take protein. We need all protein, and it's an important source for our well-being. We need to eat healthier food. But for example, to first grow the food and degrade the land to feed the animal, then feed us. Why not eat the proteins directly and move to a more balanced diet? Eat less red meat, eat healthier food, eat food in the season. It's making a huge difference. Susie Cameron, who is an incredibly dynamic and energizing person and a great role model, just wrote a simple book called One Meal a Day, which means just start with skipping one meal a day, skip the meat on it, and eat alternative proteins would have a huge impact, 15-20% reduction in the emissions in our food value chain, that alone. And then food waste, it's incredible for me to see that we have 850 million people going to bed hungry, not knowing if they wake up the next day. And then on the other side, we have the audacity to waste 30-40% of the food. Look at ourselves, how much we throw out, or we take a bite and let the rest go. That's not a way to do it. And that's disrespectful, in my opinion, to planet Earth, to future generations, but also to the people that go to bed hungry currently. So why don't we deliberately, and it's in consumers' hands as well, attack the issues of food waste with more vigor, and then hold our politicians accountable. We cannot have a political system where promises are made but actions are not aligned with that. We need to hold politicians accountable and put food on the agenda. We've succeeded to some extent in the climate negotiations to make food an integral part of it. We have now the Biodiversity Convention. I'm on my way to Colombia. It will be held in Cali this year, where we talk on how we maintain a balance in our natural boundaries. We've created the Planetary Guardians, a group of incredibly impressive people, of which I'm the vice chair, to bring higher awareness to that. But it needs all of us, and it's in a sense of urgency that it frankly needs all of us now.
Paul, finally, just leave us. I know that there's a lot going on for you at the moment, but we look out into the world and we see the conflicts that are happening, situations in the Middle East and Europe, around the world, in Africa, etc. We're talking today a little bit about the situation in relation to our climate, our animals, the sort of decrease of species. It's, if you sort of look at it through one lens, it's incredibly desperate. Just in a few words, how do we have hope, Paul, when so many people are looking out there into the world and seeing the destruction of each other and the destruction of our planet, and kind of going, well, look, this is how we are. This is how it's going to stay. We're hitting the wall. Where do you have hope when you know these things? I'm not suggesting I don't have hope, but for those who are looking out there and feeling completely disempowered by the whole thing, what gives us strength to know that we can reverse this?
Well, we are doing it in many places. It's first of all, we need to change our own minds. It was Rumi who said, yesterday I was clever, I tried to change the world. Today I'm wise, I'm changing myself. It starts with our own awareness, what is going on, if you want any change. If you want to have a sustainable company or a sustainable society, you need to be sustainable yourself first. So that would be the first step, and many people are doing that. We're seeing an incredible movement that is realizing what is happening and is moving to regenerative agriculture, for example. About 10% of the farmers are moving now. And actually, the more we see climate change, the more we can benefit from regenerative agriculture. The soil is healthier, it retains more moist. And as a result, we see 30-50% crop differences now between farmers that continue to have unsustainable practices that damage the earth and destroy the soil and keep people unhealthy versus the ones that have made this conversion. So I'm hopeful that it is on the agenda right now. We, as you rightfully say, with the Ukraine terrible conflict there and many other places in the world, we see that many of the wars and conflicts, something that is dear to your heart and obviously to many others in this world, are driven by our broken food system. We probably already today have over 200 million refugees swarming the world, basically because of our broken food system itself. Climate change, again, driven partly by our food system, will probably by the end of the century have 1 billion people look for homes somewhere else. That puts an enormous pressure on any system The wars that we're seeing are increasingly being driven because of lack of access to water or food or other things related to our food systems. So where do I get hope? It's very simple. The most important thing is that we are at a point right now that the cost of not doing anything is far exceeding the cost of doing something. So it becomes actually the biggest economic opportunity for countries, for companies, for individuals to do something about it. Even individuals, by eating smarter and eating more consciously and having less food waste and eating in the season, you can save 20-30% on your food bills and eat healthier. The same is true in companies moving to regenerative agriculture, or countries getting rid of their perverse subsidies, just to name a thing. So I'm hopeful of that the economic forces will help us. I'm equally hopeful with the speed that technology is going, with digital technology, but also our knowledge that we have on our food systems. And if we can make that knowledge globally available, also in what we call the South, the developing markets, then we can increase our productivity enormously, use far less land, degrade far less land, and actually restore biodiversity. And there are some incredibly exciting economic models. And I'm excited for the world's population waking up to this challenge and wanting to be part of the solution. 50% of the world's population is below 30 years old. They're far more conscious of the way we eat and behave. They're far more concerned about the state of the planet, and they're driving the changes at an incredible speed. And it's time for us that we not only give them a seat at the table, but that in some cases we give them the table itself. So a lot to be hopeful for and a lot happening. We just need to accelerate it. Moving in the right direction, but shifting gears would be my message.
Paul Polman, thank you so much. I hope people get a copy of your book, Net Positive, to learn as much as we've just learned in this amazing conversation. You've been a huge supporter to Peace One Day. You're an absolute inspiration to me. Thank you for supporting World Food Day, and good luck, Paul, on your journey.
Jeremy, likewise, and thanks for doing this. Good luck. See you later.